Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the neighbors of Dunn County Standing Committee to order. Here we are, 5/23/24. And before I take the roll, I'd like to run over something. Uh, I watched our committee meeting online last time, and I noticed I didn't do a very good job of noticing who was talking, so it was difficult for someone to know who was asking, who was answering, and so forth. So I'm going to try to do a little better job today on using your names, everybody's names, so that when the public watches, they'll be able to know what's going on a little better. Yeah, so we'll go with that. So call of the roll, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we are all here. And next up, we have approval of the minutes for April 25th.
I so move.
Supervisor Story moves.
Second.
Supervisor Lyon seconds. Any corrections? Okay then, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
And I noticed there were no nays. Do we have any public comment? Okay, no public comment. And then we go down to number 5, at the request of the chair, nursing home education. Laura Briesmeister is going to talk a little bit about admissions.
All right. Good morning, everyone. As you said, my name is Laura Briesmeister, and I'm filling in for Carmen as she's out. So my role at Neighbors, outside of filling in for Carmen, is the Social Services Mentor Director of Admissions. So today, I'm just going to briefly run over the admissions process. I won't go into great detail, but just to kind of tell you how it happens. A referral is a packet of information that comes in various ways. It has the patient's demographics, their medical history, and then what happened that warranted the hospitalization. That information can come from any hospital, hospice, the community. We receive these via fax. We actually have access to Mayo Clinic's Epic system, or they will call the facility directly. Social services or I myself receive the information, we review it with the nursing team and look and see if there's questions that we have, if we have availability, if we're able to accommodate their needs, medication-wise, equipment-wise. We have insurance, do a billing check, do all of those things to ensure that we are able to accept this person and provide the care that they need. At that point, we will either accept the patient or deny them for whatever the reason may be. We record all of that information, and that's part of the packet, that referral tracking that we go over every month. If the facility is full, we do offer the waiting list, which is quite long, but we do have that. And then kind of moving along, I enter their information into our EMR system, and then we disperse the information to the nursing staff so they can prepare. The hospital will arrange transportation. They come to us for as long as they may need. And then once they arrive to the facility, I meet with them and do admission paperwork with either the patient or their power of attorney. That's a very quick rundown of the overall process. And we, like I said, per the packet, we get several referrals a month. So that's a big part of my day. Any general questions regarding the admission process?
Chair Kinnear?
Yes. Chris Corpola, thank you for asking.
So, Laura, I think over the years, a common question that I've heard is there preference given or not to Dunn County residents? Can you speak to that?
We do. If a referral comes from an outside facility or state, sometimes we will get random referrals from Florida, and then we get another referral from a Dunn County resident. We do look at the Dunn County resident first. Likely the reason for that referral from Florida is because there's no other placement and they just go as far as they can. But we do look at Dunn County residents first.
Yeah, thank you. Supervisor Lyons?
Laura, is there an average length of stay? I mean, obviously, it's dependent on a lot of factors.
It varies for each patient. Most of the time, a short-term rehab person will be there for about 2 weeks. And then, of course, long-term is the length of their life. But most of the time, 2 weeks. We do have folks that are very anxious to go home, and they might not make that 2-week mark, but we encourage them to stay at least that long so they can get the full rehab that they deserve. Make a safe return home.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. That was a real nice overview. I know I had my mom in there, so I went through this, and that just describes it really nicely. It goes very smoothly. Okay, let's move down then to number 6 on the agenda, Community Mentor Administrator Report, and that's Laura Briesmeister again. 6A, Quality Assurance Steering Committee updates.
All right, so our QA met on May 9th. In that meeting, all the assistant clinical mentors were present along with Dr. Phillips and other team members. We went over the minutes from the previous meeting and some new topics that we talked about during the pharmacy report, different psychotropic use, there's really been no big issues with cycles and the recommendations from the pharmacy on that psychotropic use, but we always touch base on that. With the dining report, they continue to do audits in the houses. They're going well. Once in a while, there's things that they catch that staff need to be educated on, like simply putting a hairnet on or washing hands, but overall, the audits have been going very well, and the education to the staff have been received well, so that's good too. We did have a COVID clinic actually on May 9th, so we offered that. There were residents throughout campus that took the vaccine and they have the right to not, so that was discussed. We talked about interviewing a new director of nursing, which we did hire a new director of nursing. His name is Charles Vincent. He has, I think, 20 plus years of nursing and management experience. I was going to have him attend this meeting today. However, he is at orientation all day, so he will join us next month. We are really excited about him. And another thing we talked about, Dr. Phillips gave an update. One of our providers will be retiring soon in June. So Dr. Phillips and Dr. Chekowitz will be taking over his patients. We do have 2 nurse practitioners that fill in as well. There was a COVID-19 update. We did have some residents in one of the houses test positive. So that house was on precautions for a period of time. That has all been resolved and there are no more isolation or precautions in place. And that was a general overview of our QA meeting this month. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Supervisor, no questions. Thank you. That was good. Lots of things to talk about, but most of it sounds like it's touching base and confirming.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, next up is 6B, Employment Activity Report. Chris Anderson, I think, is giving us that via Zoom.
Good morning.
Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. So in your packet was the employment report for April. If we go through the list of types of recruitment, the top 3 were kind of the same, which is ongoing. We did do a job fair at the high school. If we go down to number of direct hire interviews, we had 10. Of those interviews, we offered 9 positions and 9 were accepted. Positions higher than a step 3, I see this is incomplete, but there should be 1 on there. There was 1 nurse that asked for a higher wage. We go down to resignation reasons. We had 2 full-time RNs. Those were part of the 9 that had started. 2 of them were HSHS nurses that quit soon after hire. They basically left the area to remain working in a more acute setting. We kind of go down through the list, and there's the other, college graduation, not a good fit, personal reasons type things. So the resignation reasons. If we go down to open positions, those were adjusted with the onboarding and offboarding. We only, as of right now, we only have 3 agency RNs, so that is down from prior months, which is a good thing. It kind of speaks to the hiring that we were able to do from HSHS closures. CNAs obviously still are our main struggle to get them or attract them, which isn't unique to any long-term care facility. If we go down to work comp lost hours, another month with no lost hours due to work comp. And then for the number of shifts due to COVID, I changed that to just COVID positives just because it's easier to track. Because there are some things that, let's say somebody has a migraine and they have a doctor's excuse for a migraine, and then I was throwing that into the COVID count, which really was kind of skewing our numbers a little bit. So I'm just reporting on the COVID-19 positives, which we would have missed shifts for. And that was roughly 10 shifts or 77.5 hours, which they were 8-hour shift, basically, people. So very low amount of COVID positive staff.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Anderson? Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
And let's see here. We go to 6B, CNA training program. Back to Laura, I think. 6C.
I don't have too much of an update. I did talk with the trainer yesterday, and she mentioned things are going well. And it sounds like their next class, they must be wrapping up soon. Their next class is going to start this fall. But she didn't have any concerns, and nothing has been reported to me, so I think things are going well with that.
Thank you very much. Next up, 6D, resident referral report.
Yeah, so kind of what I was talking about with the admission process, this is how we track all of our referrals that come through. At the beginning of last month, we had 111 residents in-house. We received 86 referrals. Of those, 13 we were able to admit. During the month of April, we had, again, COVID outbreak, so that was limiting our bed availability. Also, with Central in our new staff training, we were asked by nursing to have a capacity of 23 residents in the Central building, just to make sure that we can care for our residents we have in-house while these new staff are being trained in. We're hopeful that once the new staff are good on their feet and things are going well, we can increase those numbers. We have had quite a few community members reach out looking for placement for their loved ones, and we do our best to help them find resources if we're not able to accommodate that person, offer the waiting list or other facilities nearby. We do our best with that. That's an ongoing thing that happens all throughout the year. And at the end of the month, we had 108 residents in-house. 2 were transferred to another facility. We had 2 deaths, and then 4 residents were discharged home. So that's what I have for that.
Questions? I have one question. I assume, well, 4 discharged home. Is that the short-term rehab things?
Yep.
Okay.
Those folks all completed their therapy and were ready to return home after their short-term stay.
So that's a success?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. No other questions then? Let's go to 6E, Scott Nebefeld, Environmental Facilities Report. Scott?
Good morning, everyone. The bus is working well. They've been using that for multiple trips. Did have an issue that started happening with the lift on it. Had that checked out. It was repaired under warranty. It was a little leak on it that they repaired, refilled with hydraulic fluid, and they did adjust the pressure on the lift, turned it up a little bit. They said it was a little bit low. Everything was covered under warranty, so it's back working. But we got it in very quickly to a dealer in Eau Claire for the lift. That worked out quite well. The company that we purchased the bus from was very easy to work with on that. Contacted them and they directed me exactly what to do, took care of the problem. So that's working well. The guys are underway with keeping up with the grass growing and trimming and everything. Last week was nursing home week, so they did a extra good job on cleaning it up and getting everything trimmed back. So it's looking very nice over there. Brady and I did a walkthrough assessment of concrete sidewalks, any areas that need to be lifted or any areas that are cracked or broken up, need repair. So I'll be looking into that as far as cost for lifting. As we've talked about in the past with state surveys, if there is a drop, different variation in height of concrete on sidewalks, especially at the entrances of the building, that they can cite us for that. So very important to keep up on that and keep the sidewalks level up. So I'll be looking at that. I'll be also looking at a section of the sidewalk going from central building heading over toward the west building that the kitchen uses quite frequently. Some of the joints, the concrete on either side of the joints has broken away, making some rough spots. They've been patched in the past. The patches are not holding up. They're falling apart. So I'll look into working with highway as far as getting quotes on replacement of that concrete so we can get things a lot smoother there. The guys were working on last week, putting some yellow paint on the curbs from the handicap spots. Where the handicap spots are, the sidewalk is the same elevation as the pavement, and then of course it goes up to a sidewalk level. Well, those curbs there are not real visible, so they painted some yellow paint on those to make that variation in height more noticeable for residents, for staff, for visitors, all that, anybody in wheelchairs and stuff like that. They're going to continue down all the way across the parking spots, so that it stands out. It looks a lot nicer. They doing a great job on it. It's looking very nice. So they worked on that. With a recent storm the other night, we had a lightning strike. East building, it did take out some things. Had some issues with the fire alarm system, the door alarm system, the door locks, stuff like that. So Brady is working on that. There was some IT equipment that got taken out also, had some issues. IT replaced that. Just working forward with everything, getting it repaired and back in order. Things are coming along with that. The central building, I think I had one issue with an IT item that they talked about. Otherwise, everything else, the other buildings is working good. So things are moving along very well.
It sounds like everything has been resolved. It
Okay,
was all fixed
Good.
last night by like 5.
good. Perfect.
That was fast.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Any,
You had a question?
oh, yeah, thank you. Supervisor Wolf.
Thank you. I just was interested in clarification on the bus.
Yes.
Do you have concrete rules or places that it goes, and what does it do? What do we use it for?
Oh, for the bus? That the bus is for taking residents out for activities, hauling them to different places.
Did that answer your question as far as rules and so forth go, or?
Yeah, I was just wondering if it was a specific. Sorry about that. I was just wondering if there was a specific thing that if it was set for one item, and I'm guessing that it is for use for the facility to take them to doctor's appointments and out to the park and other things like that, whatever they have going on.
Yeah, it takes them out to activities, to the parks or different events and stuff like that. I'm not sure if it's ever used for taking to doctor's appointments. Normally you have the candy lift come and take them to the doctor's appointments because it's usually one resident at a time.
Right. Thank
Yep.
you.
Yes. Supervisor Lawfer.
Yeah, Scott, I was just wondering, the damage that was done according to the lightning, is that all under insurance and stuff? And is that all covered, or how does that work for the facility?
Sure, right at this point, so a lightning strike would be covered under insurance. Depending on the amount of the damages, we do have a $5,000 deductible on the insurance. Talking with IT, it sounded like their stuff was going to be covered. It was still under warranty, and they were able to get that covered under warranties replaced. The other stuff we have to look at cost-wise and see what things are adding up to. So I'll be working with Brady on that and Patty Isaacson to see if this warrants a claim on it at all.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So if the amount is over 5,000, probably significantly, then you do a claim. If it's under 5,000, for sure, just pay, okay.
Yes.
Just like with our cars.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's a great question. Appreciate it. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Scott, very much.
You're welcome.
6F, private pay rate, but before we start discussing that, I'd just like to discuss our role in this particular item. Last time we were introduced to it, and our role is to look at the professionals, and they're using their models and software to say, this is what we think. Our role is to say, we think we need to be more aggressive with that, or that's too big an increase. We think that's going to hurt. It's not the specifics, but the direction we want to go. So as we discuss this, keep in mind that we're not going to be looking at all these specifics and say, well, I think that should be 5.1. But it's, I think, Gordy, you kind of, I'm sorry, Supervisor Wolf, so people know who I'm talking to. Supervisor Wolf, you kind of mentioned it last time. You said, well, I think we want to be careful and do this. So that's kind of the idea as we discuss that. So Laura, would you, or is it Jane?
I think, Jane, if you're okay, I think I'll let you.
Okay.
Okay, Jane Hansen, thank you for.
Good morning, everybody. What we discussed last time was a difference. Well, in general, we always increase the private pay rate, and we hope to keep up with inflation and make it a viable operation here. Last month was discussed a 3.5 or 4% increase. The difference between the two would render us $10,934. So for $16.2 million budget, the difference between 3.5 and 4% is truly marginal as far as looking at it that direction. If you look at it from, it's going to cost me $337 a day versus $339 a day, the community will look at that as that's a $2 difference, and it's a bigger increase to them. So guidance on that would be helpful, or if you want scenarios with both, but knowing that it's only a $10,000 difference to the entire budget.
So before we get going here, just to make sure, did you recommend a number last time?
We were recommending the 3.5% increase. That would give us the $337 a day.
Okay.
And then we generally round it. So at 337.41, we could round it down to 337 or 337.50. Well, if the committee is okay with us drafting the budget with about the $337 private pay rate, that's the guidance we're looking for.
Okay, and you feel that's enough based on the numbers you have?
I don't know yet. We haven't. I haven't met with all the department heads. We're starting that in the second week of June. I will meet with all the nursing home department heads and talk about what their estimate is for, say, food increases for the next year. David is really good at keeping track of what the projections are. And then if anybody's going to conferences, or if for all those different changes, and then at the end we see, are we negative, are we positive, do we need to bump it up a little bit more, $10,000 make it better? We'll know more at the end of June.
Okay, so let's have the discussion. Supervisor Story.
Well, a few questions, I guess. What is your timeline for this?
The budget schedule has been published. Beata likes to rough it up about July 1st.
Okay.
So she can understand what bonding needs, taxation needs countywide are needed. Generally, NDC does not have any tax levy budgeted. So we're a minor part of that conversation, but July, and then in September, October, the board looks at it more thoroughly. It goes to the committee for a committee stamp of approval, and then the county board approves it in November after it's been published in the newspaper, and then it's official, and then the tax statements are printed. So that's the cycle.
So, Mr. Chair, what I'm thinking is you've mentioned you're going to be meeting with different chairs or different individuals about their needs, so the budget is not finalized yet
For
for the neighbors?
For 2025.
For 2025, okay, and that's what the 3.5 would apply to. So it
Yes.
seems to me that we would probably want to hold and see what the ultimate amount would be after she's met with those individuals and see if we do need to go a little bit higher or if we can stay where we're at, if I'm understanding things correctly. So I guess I don't want to put the cart before the horse.
Other comments? Supervisor Wolf.
Yeah, thank you. I was just curious, what does the 3.5% do to private pay as opposed to, say, your covered residents?
Could you, what does the private pay
Well,
rate do
that's what we're talking about at this point, right, is the private pay increase. Where does that put us for what Medicare or Medicaid or anything else is paying? Are we looking at coming in 10% less for paying it by ourselves, or is it something that's supposed to be even across?
We should be charging the private pay rate to at least what Medicaid pays.
Okay.
Their opinion is if they're paying more than our private pay rate, why would they do that? And that's at the state level. So we need to keep up with that. And I think we're right in the ballpark there.
Okay,
But
that's what I was wondering. Some places.
it
some
does have an
things,
effect in an opinion on, eventually.
If you go to the farm, what I'm saying, if I can clear myself, if I go to the pharmacy and I use my insurance card, it's $25, but if I paid out of pocket, it might be $20. Is that something that is figured into it, or is that?
No.
All right,
no.
thank you.
We're apples and oranges on that one.
All
Yep.
right, thank you.
As long as the committee, if you're okay with this range, you're not wanting me to estimate a budget at, say, a 10% or, a huge increase, or you're really solid on a 0% increase. I think if we're in this range and agreeable that this is where I should start, that's, whether it's 3.5 or 4, I think that doesn't matter so much. We can change that up, but as long as we're in agreement generally that that's the range you want me to start with.
Supervisor Story.
I believe that last month we did say the 3.5 was where we could start, so I think we've already talked about that. So I guess I would stay at the 3.5, but again, once you meet with those individuals and you find that it's going to be necessary, then we might want to change that.
Okay, and there'll be more discussions as the budget gets formulated for next year.
Appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Yeah, any 3.5 it looks like you can start with?
Okay, we'll start with that.
Okay, good. And I just want to follow up on Supervisor Wolf's question, just to make sure I understood the answer and the question. So we do, the pay for Medicaid is pretty similar to the private pay as far as per day. That's the idea.
Pretty
anyway.
similar. It's billed the same way. We're billing just the room and board services.
Okay. Yeah.
But we bill Medicaid. Our contract with them states that we bill on acuity. So if there's somebody who needs a 2-person lift versus somebody who's more mobile, they would have a different rate from the state.
So it's difficult to make it one-on-one, but.
We talk averages.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that before. It does make sense. If private pay is way different, why Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, yeah, and if you're a state legislator or the state budgeting people, if we're only charging, very little for private pay, why would they pay what it actually costs? Because then it doesn't make sense.
Okay, so we're going forward with 3.5%. Going once, going twice, 3 times. Yeah, thank you, Jane, very much. Next up on the agenda is consideration for action to be taken by the committee, review of vouchers and financial reports. Well, Jane Hansen has financial reports for us again.
We do. So I'll go as it was sent to me in the packet. The aging summary with the bar graph is first in my packet. It's a little higher this month, and again, that is due to our electronic claiming problems. Nationwide, there was an issue with Change Healthcare, and that's what's embedded into our computer system for our clearinghouse. So we've been manually entering claims into other systems that we're able to, and then holding off on a few that we know we have some flexibility with. So that aging is a little higher, but it's manageable. So any questions on that?
I don't think so, so we can go ahead.
Okay. Then the campus census kind of goes back to what Chris and Laura were speaking of, the what our average day is. We've got over 105 people a day average, so that's good. We're keeping up with our goals, which means the finances are keeping up as well. There is some flexibility in the amount of Medicaid versus private pay. There's people that are in the midst of applying for Medicaid. We code them as private pay until they get awarded. So there might be some changes in the data as we look back if you compare this month's to 2 months ago. So that's just how we have to work with it. They can be awarded Medicaid up to 3 months in arrears. So there's always that flexibility and variance. Any questions on this?
Questions on this one? Yeah. So you have to go back 3 months and you put the information in and it changes it for you. But okay.
Right,
Oh,
right.
okay.
We put the information in and then the bar graph changes and we have to keep up with all those changes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Now the numbers.
Now the numbers. Okay, so line 1 is the intergovernmental revenue, which we're projecting 0 of because Medicaid, after we have approved these budgets last November, Medicaid has decided basically that they're trying to pay us more in the room and board fee up front. Therefore, there wouldn't be that end of the year payment or mid-year payment. So if we combine the budgeted amounts with what we're projecting, we're on target. So that was good. Not everybody is on target on that one statewide. The miscellaneous revenues, if we add up the budgeted versus what we have, that whole collection of other donations, asset sales, CIP, we're a little bit off on that, negative $25,000 versus what we budgeted. And I believe that is due to when we ran the report, this is April numbers, there's still some money being put into our computer system when we have the donations went into deferred revenue. So then we move those back in our computer system and post them as revenue now into our numbers. So we're talking the difference between getting into the details, but a balance sheet on paper versus a cash flow that we're looking at now. So that's going to make itself whole. That's what I'm trying to say, that $30,000.
Jane, can you just tell us where you are?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know where the 30,000 is.
Oh, okay. What I did is I added the miscellaneous revenue, the interest, interdepartmental, federal grant donations, asset sale and donations CIP, and the transfer from the general fund CIP.
And you're on the first
On the
square.
First upper
The
square
neighbors
here.
of Dunn County financials, January through April 2024, which is a roll-up of all of the three before,
Yes.
below that, right?
Yes, it is. I'm
Okay.
sorry for that.
Well, I just think it's really helpful with new folks and aren't used to looking at this, if we can give them as much detail as possible, because it's a little not always intuitive.
Right. And if I get too in the weeds, let me know, because I really like getting into the deep part here and we might get too far. But that looks good. Our revenues look good. And that's driven by census, which is driven by the admissions. So it all plays together. Expenses, we are projecting a little bit lower in expenses right now. That could change if food prices change. I also understand that there's a lot of the agency staff. Those invoices are usually a month behind, so not everything for April was posted into April, because that's the nature of the beast.
As you're talking about agency staff right here, so I'd like everybody to look at, on the left side, expense, S&F, salary and fringe, I assume that is?
Salary and fringe, that's
And right
correct.
below that is agency staff?
Yes,
Okay, so the projected is what it's going to look like at the end of the year. Is that correct?
that is true. That's what we're projecting
Okay,
now.
so if
Mhm.
we added the S&F and the agency staff at the projection, that's about 11.5, 11.6.
Correct, 11.6.
Okay. And if we go back to the budget, just go to the left, 2 columns. Can you?
Could I have your packet?
Yeah.
Because I'm not finding it online.
Okay. We'll start again.
Okay, so here we go. Expenses, salary and fringe, and agency staff.
Okay.
Those lines, and then that
Barb,
one,
do you-
two, middle
Okay.
column is the budgeted, and the far right column is a projected.
Okay.
We'll wait just a bit here. Okay, I'm glad we had those printed out because it is a little confusing. But let's start again. On the far, we're looking at the top, the Neighbors of Dunn County Financials, January through April 2024. It's for the entire neighbors. And to the far right, the column is labeled Total 2024 Projected. That's at the end of the year we're projecting. And in the middle is Total 2024 Budget. So that's, we're budgeting for the entire year.
The center column.
The center column.
Yep.
So if you look at the center column, the budget for salary and fringe and the budget for agency staff, the 10 million and the 1.6 million, if you add them up, you get like 11.6 for basically our staff, right?
Correct, yep.
Now, you look over to the far right, the projected. Well, those two add up to more than that, but individually they look like it's really strange. It goes from 10,000 to 6,000, 6.8 million, I mean, 10 million to 6.8 million and 1 million to 4. But
Correct.
Together, they come out when you add them together, because we're talking about staff. And I mentioned that because it has confused me in the past. But we budget for hoping that we get everybody, and then we know we have to do the pool.
Right, we budget off of the occupancy estimates, and from there, we know we need so many staff, 24 hours a day, and we know. So from there, we estimate if everybody is a direct hire, and then we go back in our history of the average, say, of the last 3 years and say, well, how much is it over? What's the increment that agency staff costs us above and beyond the basic everybody's hired from Dunn County model? So we're budgeting that increment of increase.
So it works out.
Yep. So we're budgeting by how many people it takes to serve the occupancy.
And Chair Kinnear?
Yes, yes, thank you.
So
Ms.
if you,
Coppola.
also if you look at that 1, 2, 3, 4 lines from the bottom, the expense agency staff, you can see in the first column, the total in 2022 was about 5.3 million. The total in 2023 was 5.6 million. And now you see that our projected in the very last column, our projected for 2024 is projecting at about $1 million less at 4.7. So that reflects when you saw earlier the staffing, and it showed you that we only had 3 agency RNs. You begin to see the 2 pieces of the report interplay with each other as the number of agency staff comes down, so does that number, and then likely there's a smaller increase in the county staff side of it, but they balance each other out.
Yep. And again, we work in averages there because average, so many people take insurance and the average agency staff costs a certain amount. So there's some variables in there as well, but in general, that's how it works. And yes, we are decreasing our staffing, agency staff use.
Okay, thank you.
Is it all mud for everybody so far?
Supervisor Story?
Is that because one of the houses is not being utilized?
We budgeted the way that we are open right now. We did budget for one house not being open. So in past years, we budgeted differently, but this year it's a tighter budget, more accurate.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting you, but I just wanted to hit on the point because the big cost is salary and fringe and pay.
Absolutely.
So it's important that we look at that. But thank you. I see no questions yet again, but would you go on after I
Continue
interrupted
on?
you? Thank you.
The next line down in expenses is operating expenses, which are everything besides salaries. It's your food, it's your medical supplies, the operating supplies from facilities is in there. And we're estimating a little bit low right now. But again, as the year goes on, we'll get a clearer picture of where we're going to end the year. But right now we're doing fairly well on that. Depreciation expense is a paper expense on our cost reports, and when we go through the audit results, that's included as an expense. So we don't want you to be surprised that when the audit says, the sky is falling because we have all this expense, it's truly, we're almost, we're at $600,000 of estimated depreciation expense, which we really didn't cash out. That's not a cash expense. So just so you're aware of that. And that's why we take it out in that next little row down there. So you can see the cash versus that depreciation being embedded.
Okay, well, one comment before we go down to that next little interlude there. Is the 351,927 on the far right in blue? That's in parentheses, but in this particular case, it's positive. And now when we go down to the next 3 lines, it's normal. Is that right?
That I would call that normal for non-accounting people.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so revenue, expense, and net.
That's the important part to look at. The revenue projections are at 16,480, and the expected expenses are 16,128, which leaves us with a positive 351. And on top of that, if you take out that depreciation non-cash expense, it looks like we're doing really well. We're $1 million ahead.
Any cheering? No.
Yeah. Which either means we've missed something, or there's an expense coming, or we're just doing really well.
Supervisor Laufer has a question.
Yeah, Jane, I was just wondering, what changed between 22 and 23 to bring us, from a deficit in those years, a huge deficit, it seemed like, as to a positive here now?
It could be just staffing. We've had we have some staff turnover that were maybe at the high end of the pay scale, and now we've replaced them with fresh new people, and they're at the beginning of the pay scale.
I think that
yes.
I think there are a number of factors, Supervisor Lawfer. So one of the things that Jane Viata, our CFO, Carmen, and I have worked on over the last probably 18 months is trying to build a forecasting model. I shouldn't say trying to build because I think we've been successful. I think we've been successful because our forecasting model is showing what you're seeing now, but we did it like last year to run it through. But the influences so historically, the Neighbors of Dunn County has operated in a cash positive over the last decade in all but, not including last year, but there was, in the year they opened, they had about a $300,000 loss. And then in 2022. Now, 2023, we won't know a total final till we see our audit report in July, but it looks like that will be about a $600,000 loss. However, the things that changed between then and now are, one, you see that agency staff reduction. So the staffing, if you added up, as Supervisor Kinnear indicated, if you added up the salary and fringe and the agency staff over the years, they were above what was budgeted for. So we were spending more money than we budgeted on staff, and that number has come into fitting within what was budgeted for. But the other significant increase is that Medicaid, which is about 70% of our payer mix, has done dramatic rate increases.
Yep.
Over the last year-ish period of time, largely in response to all probably of multiple factors, but largely in response to the number of skilled nursing facility closings that have been occurred. It's become a crisis apparent to the legislators, and so there were some significant Medicaid increases. Yep. So you can see that reflected in that top number under public charges. If you look at our total public charges billing at $12,371,000 in 2022, $14 million in 2023. Now you see what it's projected at in 2024. It's a dramatic increase.
Yep. And we also received a retro rate increase from Medicaid in 2023 that was for 2022 service. So that is included, of course, in our 2023 numbers. It kind of skews our revenue because it was like prior year revenue, but still that's $250,000 from last July through December. And then now we're projecting on those increased rates from January to the end of the year. So the rate adjustments from the state are delayed due to the cost reporting and their calculations. So that's normal that we would have a late increase.
The other piece was that during 20 and 21, there was a fairly significant infusion of federal money. So while we probably were a little bit closer to the margin in those years because of federal COVID money, that allowed them to operate solidly in the positive. In fact, in 2021, NDC returned about $1.3 million to the county's general fund, in part because of that extra federal funding. But then in 22, that had come to an end. And that was probably late 22 and early 23 were probably the height of kind of the Great Resignation and all of the staffing related changes and a super hot employment market. And so those were huge struggles.
Yeah,
during those.
COVID was a big impact. Like what Chris has his review of how many shifts were replaced due to COVID, basically paying sick leave and then replacing all these people at the same time. So we had a higher labor cost due to COVID just because of sick leave and vacation being taken, and it duplicated the cost, which, yep, that was COVID. And then some prices have stabilized or come down on our medical supplies. Food really hasn't come down, and the revenues now have gone up. Medicare prices our revenue has gone up a little bit as well, so.
Thank you, Kristen, for chiming in.
Yep.
I know some of that, but not all of it, and then you forget in between. So the really big ones though are Medicaid going up, and pool costs going down.
Going down, and
Yeah.
COVID,
And then-
we're stabilized. Our census is higher too. During COVID, you can't admit people during a certain time period when you have active COVID. So then we have empty beds sitting there. So it was a double whammy.
And I would offer that maybe in coming months, next month or a coming month, you, Jane could bring that forecasting model, because we could give you a look at, this is like joy to my ears, only because like you sort of stake your belief system on it. You're like, we ran these numbers and we better hope that they're right, but they are proving to be right. And so I think that gives some credibility to the rest of the model, which shows that NDC would operate in the black increasingly over the next, as long as we took the model out, I think 5 years.
Yep. It hinges on available staffing and filling the beds that we have. That's really the difference too between 21 and 22 and currently, where we have that extra unit open in Central. That every little bit makes a difference.
Yeah, thank you for the question and the answers. So did we finish up on the central summary there? I can't remember.
I think we have, unless there's further questions on those financial East, Central, West, but we generally don't go that deep. If you look into that, Central, of course, is in the red because it's not full and they still have overhead expenses. So it's nice to look at it as an entire campus.
Okay, Supervisor Story, you have a question?
Just thinking again about what we don't have open. If it were possible to open up, that is one factor that you would take into consideration in whether or not to open it, would be to look at your staffing and look at all of those numbers and then decide if you can open it based upon that, since it wouldn't be incorporated in the budget initially.
Correct. If we are really low on agency staff, and Carmen and Laura and Chris agree that it's time to open up another unit, they have to judge if it is worth hiring all agency staff to do that, or what the labor market can provide us.
Okay, and that wouldn't be something you'd have to come back to this committee for, this board. It would just be something you can do.
Yep,
Right.
as an operational decision. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Story, and for being patient and waiting for me.
Always.
And just as Jane mentioned, this is the summary of all three, and below them are the summaries for each individual one to get an idea.
Yep. And if we can skip over the other agency stuff, I think we've talked about that pretty well. If you have questions on the detail, that's fine, but otherwise it's pretty much what we just talked about. It breaks it out by East, Central, West, and nursing staff versus agency staff. So then if we go on to what's labeled page 4 of 4, and it looks, it's a landscape document, kind of empty on the bottom half of the page. It's our senior meals detail. Without overhead. So it looks like we're making money off of senior meals, but truly it's a break-even operation. The way the numbers come out, we're just really measuring staffing and food costs and not the kitchen costs and not the heat, electric, and all that. So, so that's healthy and stable. You notice that the revenue in January, February, March, and April are pretty consistent. So we're still having producing the same amount of meals in general, it looks like, and the costs maybe in April haven't all been posted, because it looks like we ordered more food and labor in January and February. So those differences will even out by the end of the year. So And then there's a depreciation report for East Central and West, which is a little blank right now, but depreciation will get posted. Any questions on those before we go into the vouchers?
Yes, thank you Supervisor Wolf.
Yes, thank you. Just, just checking to make sure that your senior meals, now that's just for the facility, right? You don't do any outside or anything with that, or is that?
That's the Meals on Wheels.
It is,
With
okay,
aging. Yeah, we contract with the aging department
right,
and
okay.
produce those meals.
I was just curious if that total included all of the externals as well as in-house meals? and
Yeah,
all
the
that good
in-house
stuff?
meals are, those food costs are on that first financial page
Okay,
under
thank you.
dietary. Yep, we have to separate all those out with every invoice. Yep. The vouchers. Do we have any questions on those?
Yeah, there are a few to go through.
On the back page, yep, it looks.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
This is a picture of just the April expenses without the staff expense. So it's just the operational expenses. You'll see some negatives in there. Those are credits that either returned something or made a journal entry, and this just shows the 1 month picture.
Thank you Supervisor Lyon.
I have a question just about this PSC care bad debt of 25,877.
Bad debt expense?
Yeah.
Okay. We had one resident expire, and there was a debt on her account.
Oh,
And so now
okay.
we have to write that off because she can no longer contribute to that debt. It was
Okay.
at much higher, and then there's a way to collect on that
Okay.
every month. And we did quite well, but that part was not collectible.
Okay. Just
And we do try
curious.
to write things off currently and in as timely as we can. We don't want to wait till the end of the year and then have a December blowout of bad debt and then surprise you. So we try to keep up on
Okay.
even the bad news here.
Thank you. Good
Yeah.
to know.
I had never seen bad debt on the vouchers before. Have I just missed it?
Either that or I don't know. I never took it out, so I don't know why
Oh, okay.
we just didn't notice it.
That one
Supervisor.
just popped to me.
It's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we trickle in, like a couple hundred here and there on things that just we
Yeah.
can't collect on. But that one is a large one. And Carmen and Beata were aware of that. One of the larger ones I do make my supervisors aware so that we're all on the same page.
Thank you.
Now, it's something that's happened, or someone has mentioned several times today that you work together. You know, you and Carmen and Beata and Chris, and I have seen that especially since Chris has gotten heavily involved with it, and I think it's really paid benefits to let us know how well you're working together, but just working together too.
Thank you.
So it's interesting what things are spent on. After we look through this, I will look for a motion to accept the financial report and vouchers, but there's no rush.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Story, thank you.
Found another one of those bad debt ones. How many are there? I mean, this one was this PCS contractual adjustment bad debt, or does that mean it was paid?
Which page are you?
That is page 4 of 8,
Page 4.
towards the top, towards the middle, kind of right in
The $478.
the.
Contractual adjustments and bad debt, it should not have gone to contractual. It should go to care. But that was probably a Medicare B claim, or a difference between what we billed and what we could collect. Or generally that's contractual. And if somebody's copay is due and they're deceased or we can't find them, then we have to do bad debt on that. We do send things to collections on occasions, and we did receive a large payment on that in May, I believe it was, just because just came in off the collection agency, so that was paid. So we do collect, but we don't keep it on our books after it goes to a collection agency. But generally, it's because they've died and there is no more funding available is why we write off debt.
Does that happen often?
It's not unexpected, and we try to keep it and predict and work around that. We try to, collect our money ahead of time or work with the families to say, condolences, but are there any funds available? And then depending on their pay source, if they're private pay, there's probably some funds left. If it's Medicaid and they die in the beginning of the month and they haven't paid their resident liability, then we work a different way to collect that. And it depends on each situation, but yeah, it's regular, but we try to work around that or prevent it, I guess.
And this is a bit of the interplay between departments or functions in the county, but another spot where there sometimes can be gap is so someone comes in as private pay and then they exhaust their resources, so they apply for Medicaid, but in the meantime there has been divestment of their resources, and then the ADRC gets involved and looks at whether or not, maybe they owned a 40-acre plot of land and they gave it to their grandson or whatever. Now there's the path of tracking back, getting the money back from the grandson to come back so that they become Medicaid eligible, but there can be a gap in there while they're trying to figure out all of that, or, and it just gets complicated, but there are many influences that can come into why there might be a gap in payment.
And then if they expire in that time period, that
Yes.
there's not much else we can do at that point. But we do work with the families prior to that and try to get that Medicaid application going as soon as they can. So we are aware of any issues. And if there is divestment, we ask, we try our best to capture that for them, or have them work with their family to, have the grandson pay back the land money, like maybe they could take a loan and, there's all kinds of different circumstances. But yep, there is a regular bad debt allowance.
It's also important to know that once someone's admitted to the nursing home, there are very limited reasons that you can discharge them. And non-payment is a very, very difficult one. Not saying it's impossible, but it almost never happens. So if you're admitted and you lose your payer source, the likelihood is that you will be able to continue to stay there, obviously incurring a debt, but it might be a debt that's never paid.
Yes. Supervisor Story, did you have a follow-up? And then Supervisor Wolf, I think, has a question.
I do. I guess I'm not quite understanding, and so I'm thinking I need a little more education, because in my mind, I'm thinking Medicaid, it's free, but it's that in-between part where it goes from one to the other. I can see where that might happen. But I'm wondering then if there's a person or if Nick gets involved somehow to where liens can be put against the property that might be out there, or if there's a way of assessing assets that are out there to be sure that that doesn't happen. And if not, I think maybe just even one of these times, maybe just I don't know if anybody else needs it, but maybe just a little bit more of education on Medicaid, Medicare, and private pay and how all that works within the system.
So it's obvious, it's sort of starting from the easiest. So the first thing that happens is, let's say that there's an application made for Medicaid and there's been I'll just say an alleged divestment. The first thing that's going to happen is there's going to be a request to the family to make it right. You know, they're going to say, okay, this money was donated to, or this land was given to grandson, it had an estimated value of, you know, $25,000. I'm just making up a number. Grandson, family, can you take out a loan? As Jane said, can you take a loan on the property? We need to give the money back. If that doesn't happen, then that potentially triggers a look into whether there was mismanagement or misuse, an adult protective services matter. And then that could potentially, rarely, but could potentially then initiate a court process.
But how would you know? I mean, there's usually a probate or something that might happen, but how would you know that there's property out there after the person dies that you're going to maybe be?
Oh, this would be
from?
while they were still alive. Well, so what happens in that interim, like you said, so I had some money, I had $50,000 in my, or a year, I had $100,000 in my 401k, I don't know, whatever. And I had 40 acres of land. Then I gave the land to my son, and over a year, we spent my $100,000 to pay for my skilled nursing bill. Now I apply for Medicaid, and Medicaid asks questions about, did you have some money that you got, or some resource that you got rid of? And I say, yeah, I had 40 acres of land. I gave it to my grandson. Just happened last year. Well, divestment has about a 5-year look back. So you can't just decide to give it to your grandson a year before you need it. So now there's an ask to give your grandson to give the money back.
But in the meantime, we're writing it off.
Well, we're not necessarily writing it off. There's a leg, but like Jane said, if somebody then dies in that process, then it's a write-off. Because at that point in time, there's no.
We can't directly put a lien on a property that has been transferred. We had a case 2 years ago.
Excuse me, what?
Oh, okay, yeah, we're off the topic.
We're off the
of
topic
vouchers.
here, and this is really getting into the weeds, and perhaps
Right.
we, like you said, we
Education.
could talk about it a little bit. But yeah, this is more than.
It's more
we
than the
need to know
vouchers
right
and the
now.
financials. If you want to
Yeah.
have it as a different topic and
Yeah.
request it to be on the agenda, we could prepare something for that.
Supervisor Wolf.
Thank you. I understand this is a very, very serious topic and everything, but the little kid in me just can't stop. I really need to know where you were able to procure your tires and batteries for $83.
I think it was maybe a small tire on a
I had to try.
wheelchair or something, yes.
I like that. That's pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Supervisor Laufer, you have a comment? Question?
Yes. What is PCS care?
PCS.
The easiest answer is anything that starts with PCS is a revenue. It's an income.
It's private care services. There is a real acronym for that, but it's the private pay. And it's all care. It's that incorporates the Medicare, Medicaid, all revenues, yeah.
Okay, so
Where do you see it here?
on
So we can
page
look.
6 of 8, under NDCW administration, where it gets down to the bottom, and it says PCS care, bad debt of $30,802.91.
Oh, okay.
How does that apply to administration? Where did you?
That falls under that department. There's not another department to put that under. It wouldn't be under dietary or maintenance. So administration has all those other categories. Was that your question? Why is it under administration?
Yeah,
I think that it's not related to, it's not directly related to administration. It's the place where you can put it when you're writing off bad debt to an uncollected care bill.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Story.
I move approval of the vouchers
Thank you. Supervisor Story moves to approve the vouchers and financial report?
and financial report.
Okay,
I second.
okay. Supervisor Wolf, seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving, in this case, the financial reports and the vouchers, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it passes. Thank you. Now, one thing I want to ask about, should we have hard copies for the meeting? Because in maybe a different committee, we don't have all these numbers. Would it be a benefit for everybody to have hard copies of at least the financial part? Just you thumbs up, thumbs down, or whatever.
I couldn't find it out there on my computer, so that was something I couldn't find. I could find the agenda, I could find the minutes, but I didn't find a packet.
I agree, because I just helped Supervisor Wolf to look too, and we couldn't. And so I don't know if it was in the switch of board and we'll check the distribution to make sure that's accurate.
Okay.
But I couldn't find it there either, so there's a glitch in that.
Okay, yeah, and I did get one. So for next meeting, can we have hard copies for everybody? And in the meantime, we'll work to see that we can get it to the computer. Because I know I did get it, but I was on, I'm the only one that was on. Okay.
I'm the other one who did get it too, but it was not in the, there's the two tabs at the top, focused and other includes all of the HR stuff, the employee stuff.
Okay.
And that's where it comes through on my computer.
Okay.
And I had all of those numbers on my computer. What would be helpful, a paper copy of the agenda would be helpful because I like making notes on agendas. It's always, but it.
Okay, well, I'll leave that to you to decide, Laura, what you'd like to do with that. And also, thank you all for your patience and me trying to let the public know who's talking and so forth. And Chris, I'm glad you got, it wasn't a short straw, it was a long straw to come to our meetings instead of the other ones. Jane, I'm glad you're here in person. It really helped. So next meeting time would be?
June 27th.
There's the voice out of the blue. Thank you, Chris. I forgot
You're
you're
welcome.
here. June 27th, 9 a.m.
Correct.
May I make one comment about the next agenda?
Yes.
The auditors have confirmed that they can present on June 27th. They usually come virtually and present the audit report.
For the neighbors.
For the neighbors. Ours is always done first for the county audits, and I gave them 2 dates and asked them which, June or July, and they thought July would work for them.
July or June?
June.
Or June, excuse me, June. Yep.
Okay.
If it
so you
changes,
have
I'll
it.
let you know.
I had a question.
And, yes.
How,
one more.
how soon are your vouchers, like for May, how soon are you done with them or prepared? Like this report was for April.
Mhm.
When did you have these vouchers made out and when will they be made out for the month of May?
The month of May, the period stays open until about the 15th of the following month. So on April, say on May 10th, when we print this off, or May 12th, we could actually still be posting back to April
Oh, I see.
for those charges. So they get categorized into the right month.
Right.
So that we can see those.
So can we have a hard copy of the May one prior to our next meeting so that we could go through this, prior to the meeting to look at it?
A
Okay,
hard
that wouldn't
copy
be up to Jane.
prior, I don't know. Yeah,
But we're going to
that's-
send you one in the mail.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to do that.
For the actual packet or whatever, but would this be included then in that packet?
Yes.
It will, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And we hope you're going to you three will get it, but we can send a hard copy to Supervisor Wolf, Supervisor Story, if you want one, at least this time.
Thank you. I really don't need a hard copy sent. If you want to just put it in the mailbox here, because I'm in town all the time, I can pop in and pick it up. I don't need it mailed.
Okay, but you'd like one at least for now until we can get things straightened out?
Right, until I make sure I can
Excellent.
see it. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful.
I'm confident that it will be resolved by then.
There was
Well,
a
yes,
glitch. I just saw it, so we'll fix it.
Yeah, they take care of things. So, next meeting time is set. Any announcements? Great job. Thank you. That's a good deal. And this meeting is adjourned. So.
Great.
It's look good for a little bit.